Hi, ladies. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We're so excited to be here with our author this month, Emily Henry. And of course, I have 18,000 things on top of the book. But this was August's, I can't believe I'm saying that. August is already over. August's book club book, which is Beach Read, perfect summer read for those of us in this hemisphere of the world, by Emily Henry, who's joining us this evening to talk to us about her book, which we really, really appreciate. Very, very quickly, because your website leaves much to the imagination, but Emily Henry is the #1 Times New York Times bestseller, author of People We Meet on Vacation and Beach Read, as well as several young adult novels. She lives and writes in Cincinnati and the part of Kentucky just beneath it, which as a Canadian, I have no idea where that is. Her books have been featured in BuzzFeed, Oprah Magazine, Entertainment Weekly, The New York Times, The Skim, Shondaland, Betches, Bustle, and more. And you can find her on Instagram at Emily Henry Writes. So Emily, that leaves a lot to the imagination. Can you give us a little bit more about how you got into writing and sort of like what brought you to today?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And it's really fun that we get to talk about Beach Read because all summer I've been, doing these virtual events, but they've pretty much all been for people we meet on vacation. So I'm like excited to go back to Beach Read because it's like been a little bit since I've thought about it. So yeah, like my very bland bio says, I live in Cincinnati, which is pretty much straight down from Toronto, which I know is like a huge area, but like just kind of middle right side of the country if you're looking at a map. I always pretty much knew I wanted to be a writer, but there were big chunks of time where I kind of let go of that and thought that I was going to do something else. For the first couple of years of college, I wanted to be a professional modern dancer. I went to a liberal arts school that had a dance program, but I went on a writing scholarship. And when I was there, part of the deal for me to keep my scholarship was I had to take a writing class either per semester or per year. And so I was doing that, and I realized I really loved my writing classes so much. And it had been a few years since I had been writing very much at all, other than, like essays for school or whatever. So I got serious about writing again while I was there. Graduated, got a technical writing job, which was horrible. And for anyone who is pursuing publishing, I feel like one of my biggest pieces of advice is like, don't have a writing job while you're pursuing publishing, because you just get home at the end of the day and you're like, I cannot look at a computer, I cannot write, I cannot create something. I've been doing that all day, even if it's just like boring technical writing. So I did that for a few years and then started writing full time. And yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty boring path, I think. And there really isn't one normal path. I know a lot of writers who had never really done anything until like the first book they published. And I know writers who worked toward publishing for like 35 years, like really devotedly. But yeah, it was something that I always had somewhat of a knack for, and I just realized how much I loved it when I was taking a lot of writing classes. And I did not know that I liked romance. I did not know I liked reading or writing romance until I had already been publishing YA for a few years. I had never read a romance novel. I'd read, love stories like the Jane Austen novels and the Bronte novels and things with a strong romantic thread, but I had never read a novel that would be shelved as romance. And then while I was publishing YA, I kind of just was going through some burnout and some just like crises about the state of the world and my own mental health and everything that was happening. And so in between working on my YA projects, I started writing Beach Read entirely for myself. And it was not something I was planning to try and publish. Like I said, I hadn't read romance yet. It was really just, I knew what kind of story I wanted to be immersed in. And I didn't have a whole lot of ideas, and I felt very stuck in a whole lot of ways. And so in my desperation to come up with a plot for a book, I just decided I would write a book about writer's block. And then after that, it was like weirdly easy, which is not usually the case, but was the case for that book. Once I gave a character writer's block who wasn't me, I just felt like I knew how to keep making it worse. And that, I feel like, is a lot of what plotting is just making things a little bit worse and a little bit worse for your characters and seeing how they deal with it. And so after I wrote it, I set it aside. It was just this thing that I was working on. No one knew I was working on it. It was really just something I was giving myself a few hours at a time to just go and write this, like, what I thought was going to be very happy, light love story. And in some ways it is, but other things crept in. And then I set it aside because I didn't have any plans to publish that. And a couple of years went by and I watched romance have this big renaissance. I think that romance is evergreen and there have always and will always be romance readers. But, you know, there were some new authors who, and some new approaches with marketing and design. And we all, you know about the cutesy, like, illustrated covers. Beach Read has one. And all of that was just kind of bringing in all of these first time romance readers and new romance readers who hadn't really been, I don't know, had just been like intimidated maybe by the original, like the classic romance cover. And so I was watching, you know, like Jasmine Guillory and Helen Huang and people like this have these big breakout books, and seeing people be very excited about, you know, this romantic comedy form. And so I emailed my agent and was like, hey, I'm not positive, but I think I actually wrote one of these a couple of years ago. Like, I don't know for sure if it's the right tone. I don't know if anyone would want it. I did know when I was writing it, like, I'm putting a cult into this and like stuff like that. So I really didn't know if I was the right reader for it, and no one else in the world wanted it. So I kind of like prefaced with that. And my agent was like, well, sure, send it to me. You know, I don't really like represent a ton of stuff like that, but I'll take a look. And she read it and she loved it. And she was like, okay, you need to, first of all, read romance novels, because you don't just want to like publish into a genre that you don't actually know anything about, which obviously. So she, first things first, she sent me Sally Thorne's The Hating Game, which is so funny and fun and has slapstick moments. And Sally Thorne's writing is just so vivacious and strange and delightful. But the book is also very sexy and yeah, just kind of like, it's like cotton candy. And I mean that as the utmost compliment. So after I read that book, I realized, okay, yes, I am the right audience for this genre that I have avoided for my entire life. And so since then, I have been an avid and devoted romance reader. It's like probably 70% of what I read at this point. I've kind of eased back a little bit just because I was reading like nonstop romance for all of the pandemic so far. But yeah, I mean, it was just like, I came to it through writing it. It was like, I wanted something happy. And so I was writing this kind of story that I think, like, I was thinking more of like the romantic comedy movies, which I had never had like an aversion to in any way, or been intimidated by or whatever. And then after writing it, realized how much I actually loved reading in this genre. And so it was not like I set out to be this kind of author in particular or to write this kind of book. It was just like, this is what I want to be doing with my time. And now as a reader, it's like very much the same thing. And a lot of the thing that I really write for is the same exact feeling that I read for. It's like, if you can just think about that feeling of when you're loving a book so much that you really don't want to do anything else, and you're like taking it to the bathroom with you, and you're just like reading in every spare minute, and like just, yeah, walking down the hallway, like brushing your teeth and trying to figure out how to like hold the toothbrush in the book. That is the feeling that I am looking for when I'm writing too. And so I always, when I realize I love reading something, that's something I try and push into and see how how writing that feels for me. But it's also kind of funny because I love reading a ton of stuff that I just don't think I'm that good at writing, at least not yet. So, but I'll always try. I'll try pretty much any genre at this point.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, I just kind of went. Can you tell I haven't like socialized in a little bit? It's like, here we go.
No, it was excellent. Thank you. That gives us so much great background information. I do want to go back to writing it for yourself. I've never heard an author say that, actually, that like that you love the process so much that it was something you were doing for yourself.
Yeah, I think the weird thing is before you publish, when you're like actively pursuing publishing, it's weird because at least for me, and I think a lot of my friends that I've talked to about this, there's this weird kind of like manic energy and momentum when you're working where it's like you're really excited about what you're working on, but there's also this pressure underneath all of it where it feels like I need to be able to share this. I'm so excited about this. Will this be the book that I get to share with the world? Will this be the book that like I'll have readers for or whatever? And it was really, you know, like that's like an excruciating kind of feeling, but it's also like when you want to press on a bruise, like it feels bad, but it also feels good. And then once you publish, it's really weird because even if you have a very small readership, which in YA I had a mid-sized readership, like not the tiniest, but definitely not large. And once you have any size readership, it's really weird because after that, every single time you write something, you're thinking about it having readers, and that really can be terrifying because you're just thinking like, you know, everybody tells you when you're a new author, do not go on Goodreads, like under no circumstances go on Goodreads. And every single author I know ignores that. And every single author I know like ends up like losing days to just like laying on the couch and being like, well, this random stranger like didn't like this detail of my book, whatever. And it's like you have to really kind of toughen up and then train yourself to just not go looking for things you don't actually want to see. But when you're writing, it's really weird because it's like you can have 5 people who've reached out to you to tell you like, I really loved this thing about your book. And then you remember this one review that really didn't like that thing. And when you're writing, it's sort of like you start editing in your mind and being like, well, how will this, you know, these people like react to this? Will they like this? Will they dislike it? And that takes a lot of the joy out of writing. And it's like a weird path to get back to that. And really, I believe fully that there are writers who do not feel this way, but I will tell you every single one of my writer friends feel this way, where they're like, it is just not as much fun, weirdly, once you have readers, because you're always thinking like they're expecting this or they're going to want something from this, and what if I can't deliver it? It just feels this kind of pressure that you don't have beforehand. So Beach Read was my little way of sneakily creating this vacuum again, where it was like, I'm writing this, and I was very, very lucky. Like I don't have kids. I like live in a very cheap city. Like I could afford to be like, I'm devoting a lot of time to writing a book I probably won't ever be able to sell. And a lot of people like don't have that, you know, ability to do that. But for me, it was like, I'm taking a month off of my like contracted books, and I'm just like vacationing into this book that is for me. And you know, there's always that piece of you in the back of your mind that's like, but maybe this like is something other people want. But it was really great to just throw that out the window and ignore that voice, because I was able to write the book that I really wanted, which is why it's like kind of a weird romance novel with like a cult in it and that sort of thing. Because I really was just writing like, what do I want to read? What do I want to put these characters through? Like, what story am I going to enjoy telling?
Okay, ladies, just before I continue, if you do want to ask a question to our author this evening, please feel free to raise your hand, or you can use the chat functionality. There's already some questions in there and I will get to them, I promise. And yeah, so just feel free to put your hand up and we can ask the question. Before I get to those, I do have one more question myself. So you started in YA and you moved to romance, and is it fair to say that you've had more success since you moved to romance?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The good news is if she goes on Goodreads, she's going to see a lot of positive stuff for her last 2 books.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I do still go on Goodreads, but I'm just very careful. I really do the thing where I like shield every once in a while. I'll be like, I need a boost, and I just like very carefully get on and scroll down and only look at the newest 5-star ratings, and I'll give myself a little boost. I have friends who I will go on to their Goodreads pages and get their 5 stars and screenshot them and send it to them, because it's like, and I know this seems counterintuitive to a lot of people, where they're like, well, don't you need like, you know, isn't it helpful to know what people aren't liking? And I think that's like a fair and valid thought. But the thing is, I mean, you all know, if you use Goodreads, you know that you'll go on and see like one person's review will be like, this book was so slow, nothing happened. And then the next review will be like, this book was way too fast paced. It wasn't any time for characters, whatever. And those were two different experiences of the same book, which is like what makes Goodreads cool, is that you can like see this, totally different experience of the same thing. But when I'm talking to new authors who are kind of getting over that hump of like how do I believe in myself after having readers for the first time, and just kind of being a sensitive little hermit who now like has people writing on the internet how they feel about this thing that I spent like a year or 2 years on or whatever. I always tell them, like, you need to write for the people who loved what you did. Don't write for the people who don't like what you do, because they will go and find other books and other authors that are for them and that they will like. And you cannot make everyone happy. So I really think if you're going to try and like tune in to one audience, you should tune into the one who likes what you're doing and not the one who doesn't like what you're doing. Because it's like, you truly cannot make everyone happy. Also, I have a pit bull who's just trying to climb into my lap. So sorry if that happens.
Emily, that really resonated with me because we get a lot of comments on the books we read, and we actually do a vote every month, but not every month we get emails about the books we've chosen.
Yeah,
And you're completely right. We can't make everybody happy, and the books that we read will resonate with some people and not with others. So I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, and it's, I think it's up to authors to kind of learn that too, because you don't need everyone to like what you do. And like, again, like that's the joy of Goodreads, that's the joy of book clubs. It's fun to get together and talk about like your very different feelings about something, and like, I don't know, it's just like a way that humans connect. And yeah, but it's definitely a process. It's definitely a process to getting to that point of feeling like I don't need everyone in the entire world to love what I make, and by extension love me. That's so much of life in general, though.
Glenna Sue has a question that she wants to ask live. So let me.
Yes, I really loved this book. And one of the reasons I loved it so much was the banter between January and Gus. And I've tried writing romances, and it is so hard to do. I mean, it seemed either forced or juvenile, and you were seems to do so well with it. Do you have any tips for those of us who just can't get our heroine and hero to talk to each other without them sounding really juvenile or hitting? I mean, it's just really difficult for me.
No, that's such a good question, and I've actually been working on how to answer that, because I do feel like it's one of the very few things that came a little bit naturally to me versus the things I've worked very hard at. But I think that a lot of what it is, and I also sometimes, will be reading banter and think like, this isn't my exact sense of humor, and I've been kind of trying to figure out what is it that makes banter work for me and not work for me. And I think what it is, what's fun about a conversation when you're reading it, whether it's banter or an argument, is this feeling of a whole lot of either tension or play. And so this is like such like weird, just metaphorical advice, but hopefully it makes sense. So I think that sometimes when people are writing dialogue, they're really using it as an excuse to just kind of share information that they want to move forward. Even if that's like, okay, I'm going to get these characters to know each other better. So they're going to like, this one's going to share this thing about their backstory, and this one's going to share this thing about their backstory or whatever. And it ends up feeling like this baton is being like passed back and forth. It's like, I said this, now you say this. And in conversation, that's not really how it goes, especially if it's like a good conversation. If it's a good conversation, if you've met someone who you're just really like sparking to, it feels like this weird tennis match. Or like, I always think more actually like table tennis, because in table tennis, maybe just because I'm so bad at it, you don't actually like want to score the point. You kind of want to keep the game going. That's what's more exciting, is like getting that energy building up, going back and forth, versus being like, I caught you unawares and now like you have nothing to say to me. And so I think when I'm thinking about banter, like I'm trying to avoid that feeling of information just being passed neatly back and forth, and instead key into like, someone says something and the other person takes that and runs with it and makes it like so much more extreme or ridiculous or absurd or whatever, or they kind of throw it back. And I think almost like if you're trying to write banter, I almost wonder if it would be worth trying to start by writing a fight instead, because I think when you're writing an argument, that you automatically get rid of that that gentleness of the information being passed back and forth. You get this sense of momentum, and that might just kind of unlock something if you take the same conversation that you're trying to write as like a flirtatious, you know, fun exchange, and make it this more like irritable or annoyed. But as for how to make it not sound juvenile, I don't have any strong advice, but I just, there's a brand of humor that I don't love, that's sort of just like someone saying, I don't even know how to explain this. I was texting with a friend because I was like, I think people describe my banter as like snarky or sarcastic, but that's not how I really think about it. And when I'm reading something that I think like, this is really snarky or sarcastic, it's always like the character is like popping her hip and saying something sassily. And I think another thing in dialogue in general that we always tend to say is like, removing as many adverbs as you can in your dialogue tags will also push you to write a sentence that can only be read in this way. So if you're trying to write something funny, see if you're using like, she says this like sassily or snarkily or whatever, and see if you take that out, if there's a way you can use word choice to do that instead, to be a little bit sassy or a little bit snarky.
Well, thank you so much. I noticed you started the book with the grumpy, you know, with the party and kind of with a fight, and that was very effective.
Well, thank you. And also, I love your lipstick.
Oh,
Apropos of nothing.
It's actually Zoom lipstick, but you know, that's one of the great things about Zoom makeup. You can switch in the middle of the.
My computer's too old to let me do that. So someday that's my future.
Oh.
All right. Well, thank you for asking the question, Glenna. That was very helpful. And we do have another live question, but before I go to that, I'm going to ask one of the questions from the chat window, and it's from Linda. And so we're going to go big picture here. She's got a very big question. She wants to know how long it takes you to write a book and how long the process is from completion to publication.
Ooh, okay. So for me, it's a little bit all over the place, but I tend to write first drafts very, very, very quickly. And I don't worry about anything being good enough to publish or to be read. So I will usually write first drafts in between a month and 8 weeks, a month and 2 months. And that could change hugely. Sometimes I write a book over 2 months and it's like, oh, this actually works pretty well and only needs minor edits. And sometimes it's like I write a book over 2 months and then I spend the next 6 months totally rewriting it once I figure out how I wish I'd written it the first time. But I think for publication, so usually when you sell a book, you're selling it and it's like in its final form pre-edits, and then your editor will take you through, you know, the editorial process, which is months more. But usually it's about 1.5 to 2 years from the time you sell it to when it comes out. When you're under contract for multiple books, they usually will kind of stagger it. And so like I'm finishing up copy edits on my next book that will come out next summer, and around, you know, in the same time span, I'm starting to like be doing some of the early work of writing my book that will come after that. And so that usually now I'm like kind of on a year schedule with these current projects, which won't always work. And sometimes, you know, you have to get deadlines pushed back and release dates pushed back. But a lot of times they really like to have you on that 1 book a year schedule. And so you're writing it and then it's coming out about a year later.
Thank you for that, Emily. So we do have a live question here. Merjanatu, would you like to ask your question?
Oh my gosh, you did such a good job saying my name. Yeah, Merjanatu.
I was practicing.
Good job. I know it's a tricky one. Sorry if it's a little loud. I'm outside. It's like missing in my chair.
It's beautiful.
Big character. Yeah, I forgot I was doing this and I was like out and about. I was like, I really want to drink. I just wanted to first of all give you a 5-star review out loud right here. I'm obsessed with both People We Meet on Vacation and Beach Read. It like really encouraged me to actually start writing because I've always wanted to.
Oh,
and one of the things I've like actually struggled with is that I just have made the like protagonist myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious if you saw yourself in January, and she's also a writer.
Oh my God.
Like, I was curious like how you made the line between who you are and she is, because sometimes I just like add in a random fact that she's not absolutely myself.
Yes. Yes. Okay. That's a great question. So I do see myself in every character that I write for the most part, like even a lot of the side characters, but I think, and I also will say, I use a lot of those little details too. And so I don't think that that's wrong to just be like, okay, well, this person, this character is, I'm going to take this very specific thing that I like or don't like or do, like a little twitch I have, whatever. I think those little details are the things that make a character feel really real. Like when you're just like, oh, that's so specific. That's like only, like you could only write that about a real person, that they do this like weird little thing. But I think as far as the line, when I am writing a book, a lot of times I'm trying to figure out the emotional arc, especially now that I'm writing in romance, where it's like plot is very secondary. Like the plot is kind of just, this person is having an experience and, you know, falling in love, whatever. So I'm usually thinking about an emotional arc. And so a lot of times it's like, I will be taking one thing that I've been wrestling with and I'll build an entire character around that one thing. And so in that way, I'll always relate to what the character is going through, and I'll feel like I can pull from it and it will feel honest. But at the same time, my characters are not going to be identical, because it's kind of like I'm cordoning off like a little section of myself. And I mean, even with January and Gus, like that's a really good example, because I really, really, really relate to both of them. And depending on the day, might say I'm January or might say I'm Gus. And it really was taking these two different kind of like warring viewpoints that I contain both of, and building a character around both of those. So the character who is the cynic or the pessimist, and you know, how did this character, what makes a person that way, and how does that affect the way that they make their decisions and their daily life? And then the optimist, like same questions, like what does that look like? And it's really weird, because I think to make a character feel really real, you're kind of narrowing in to this really sharp, specific version of a human being, which is funny because in real life, I think we're all so complicated that like it would be nearly impossible to write any of us. But it feels really real and authentic to me as a reader, at least, and as a writer, when it's like you can tell this character has been built so clearly around like the specifics of who they are. And I think like one thing to make sure that you're not writing yourself, and I think especially like in earlier books, it's a good thing to do, give your main character a different family than you. Partly because if you end up getting published and your first book is like exactly your family, your entire family is going to notice that, and then they're going to think it's you the whole time they're reading it, and they're going to be like, do you really do that, whatever, and you're going to have to be like, no, leave me alone, don't talk to me. So I think one good thing, like really thinking about family, that informs so much of how I build my characters, because a lot of times it's like, I need to know, like January is clearly an only child who like kind of entertained her parents, and you know has just sort of been the light of their world. And with Gus, it's like he has clearly felt neglect, and like he wasn't chosen. And so a lot of times that really is how I figure out what that emotional arc is going to be, as I think about their childhood, who that sets them up to be. So don't make the family exactly your family, but look at that family and think like, where is this person in the birth order? Like, who are their siblings? How many parents do they have? All of that. And that will really help. Weirdly, I think like the further back you go into a character's history, the clearer their present becomes.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. I appreciate that.
Sorry, my sound is cutting out. Let me see.
Well, I just said thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. Thanks for the great question.
Thanks.
So we have another question here from Jennifer in the chat, and it's actually a great question that I was wondering myself. In the book, you distinguish between women's fiction and romance. Do you think this is an important distinction? And how do you feel about these categories getting, or how do you feel about how these categories get used?
Yeah, I think that to some people it is a very important distinction. And so that matters to me. I know there are, you know, kind of devoted romance readers who have been reading the genre widely for a long time, who do have certain expectations that a newer, you know, a person who's newer to the genre won't necessarily have. And so it can feel like a little bit whiplash if that's not what you think you're picking up. And so if in that way, I think it does really matter. And I think the thing is, the divisions, the genres that we make up are really all about marketing and getting to the right reader. And that's why they matter, is just making sure that the person can find them. And like, I'll admit, when I go into a bookstore, like I think the name women's fiction is accurate or necessary? Not really, but when I go into a bookstore, I do go to the women's fiction section because I know what kind of books I'm looking for, and they're going to be shelved as women's fiction. Like, I don't know how we really got to naming them that, but I don't have like a better suggestion either. So I don't know, it is changing. They're kind of fluid. I read a lot of women's fiction now that has a really strong romantic thread, but it doesn't have that like guaranteed happily ever after or happy for now that romance is sort of promises its readers, and it might have like a strong like secondary plot. So yeah, it's just one of those tricky things where it's like, I think there probably is a better name out there for women's fiction, but it is also like you're carving out this corner of the bookstore and being like, these are books that are mostly going to be about women, mostly written by women for women. And there is value in that, because that's not how like the larger world is made at this point. So having that little corner where you know what to expect. Same thing with romance. Like, I mean, there's some women's fiction I love with love stories that are like gutting, but I don't necessarily want to pick those up all the time. Sometimes I really do just want to like watch a rake and a duchess fall in love and know that they're going to be married at the end. Like, I don't know. So it's all about like what serves you. I think, you know, it's like I kind of, like most people, I think it's like I can bristle at the names for them, but they don't really hurt me. If somebody calls my books chick lit, I'm like, that's fine. That doesn't hurt me. It does bother me that when I told my dentist what I wrote, he said, guess I won't be reading any of your books. Like, that's a little bit annoying, but calling my books chick lit, that's fine. I mean, I'm a chick and I hope a lot of chicks enjoy them. And I think people who aren't chicks might be missing out on a lot of very good books.
We have this similar problem with our name because it's called the Girly Book Club.
Yeah. Well, but then it's like, it is one of those things where it's like, but then you know what we just don't have better names. Language isn't perfect, unfortunately, as much as we would all like for it to be. So you're just saying this is kind of what to expect. And I want to be in a girly book club.
Desiree, would you like to ask your question live, please?
Yes, it's Desiree, but yes.
Desiree, I'm sorry.
No problem. So firstly, I just want to say that I absolutely loved Beach Read. And when I finished it, I was like, oh my God, am I ever going to read another book this incredible again? I was just like, what am I going to do? I think I couldn't pick up anything else for like a few days because it just wasn't going to compare. And the intimate moments with the characters were just, I remember my breath hitching when their fingers would touch or their knees would bump or like all of that stuff. So it was all incredible. But my question is in regards to considering like all the books that you've written and your emotional writing process. Is it similar for each book? Is it different? Like, is it usually this manic excitement, or is there like a point where you're like, I hate this and I don't want to continue?
Yes to all of the above. Okay, I don't know if any of y'all follow Victoria Schwab on Instagram, but she was sharing something the other day while she's drafting that was like, all of my friends and family swear that every time I write a book, I like get to this point, but I really just don't remember it. Like, I think this is like the worst it's ever gone, whatever. And I like laughed because every single time I write a book, I get to a point where like, I'm just sort of devastated. I'm like, this book will never work. It's broken beyond repair. It's horrible. Like, I finally just failed so hard. And every time my husband is like, you felt the same way with the last book. And I'm like, no, I didn't. The last book was great. Like, the last book was a joy. And I almost wonder if it's like when people give birth and then later they're just like, it was fine. I don't think it was fine. I think you just got a baby out of it. And so now you think it was fine. And I kind of feel like that's how writing is for me. It's like, at first there is that manic excitement, and usually I get about 25 to 40,000 words in, which my books are usually about like 95,000 words. So it's like, I kind of get through that first act and I'm like, this is great. And then I hit a wall and just feel like I have never written a book, will never write a book again, like have no idea what's going on. And And it always feels like I get lost in this maze. And actually in the editing process that happens again, because when you finally finish a draft, you feel like, okay, I know this book, it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, whatever. Then you start editing it and you have to, it's like when you're cleaning a really messy room or like a really horribly disorganized closet, you have to pull everything out and it takes so long. And then it's like nighttime and you just have like stuff spread out all through your hallway and you're like, this is so much worse. Why did I start organizing the closet? That is how revising feels to me every single time. It just turns into this snarled mess where I feel like I've broken it. I don't know how to fix it. So yes, it always feels the same. And unfortunately, it always feels like the first time too. So I don't know, are you a writer as well?
Not really, but I'm just curious about the process because
Yeah.
I'm an artist, so I'm a graphic designer and stuff. So I know that there's points where it's just like, I just want to throw it away.
Yeah,
but
you're like, you're just like, what am I looking at? Like, is this like a clip art apple that I've made? What's happening?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you for the
sharing.
question.
And we have another one from the ladies that lounge in the pool.
Ooh, the
Mhm.
ladies that lounge.
Hi. So I have more of like a comment and compound question. So
Cool.
my first comment was that I really appreciated how January toward the end, sorry, I'm assuming everybody's read it, but January toward the end realized that her dad's situation with engaging with or him being married, engaging with a woman outside of his marriage, had some parallels to her situation with just with her situation. I really enjoyed that. I kind of wish she would have like mentally explored that more because I definitely think that was an important part of the book for me.
Yeah.
And then question wise, I was very interested in the development of the two books they were writing. And so I was kind of curious how you, I don't know, came up with the plan for like the Marconi Circus situation. Yeah. And then I definitely thought his book was going to be different than it turned out.
Yes, me too.
What he wrote about. I was really into it until I heard the final explanation. I was like, I'm not sure. Yeah. But I would read both of those books to a point, his up until that point. So how did you, you almost had to come up with a little mini storyline within, too many storylines within. And then do you ever think that you would expand on what you kind of developed from those two book storylines?
I don't know if I would expand. I'll start with that. I don't know if I would expand because a lot, like I said, like the way that I write feels very similar to the way that you read when you're having a good time reading, where it's like, I want to know what happens next. And so everything I'm doing is about like getting there faster while also being like, oh, I don't want it to end. And so that's what, I don't really outline when I write. It's like, I really figure out what's going on. And again, that's why I have to rewrite so often. But I love that feeling of like exploration and discovery. And so it would be hard for me to write either of their books at this point if I did end up where either of those books ended up. So if I did write them, I think that either one would have to have a different ending because I would need to be surprised to enjoy it. As far as coming up with the plots for those, it was like, I think it was like pretty easy to kind of come up with like the basic plot for either of them because I was thinking like, what is the intersection of romance and literary fiction? And so then it's like your mind goes to I feel like some of like Kristen Hanna's novels and things like that are like, kind of gut wrenching, but like there's a love story and whatever. And then with Gus's book, like what is the intersection of this like existentialist literary fiction, but like with a romance? And so then it's like, I guess I was thinking of like, I cannot think of a single literary fiction writer's name right now. I was going to say Franzen, but that's not who I'm talking about. It's the guy, I can't even think of the titles of them. My husband would know because he reads that stuff. But I was thinking about that and how a lot of times there actually is kind of a love story even in those. It's just sort of like doomed and tragic in a different way than like the romantic like women's fiction that has like, it's doomed and tragic too, but it's like still just sort of like I don't know, like there's this angsty hopefulness to it. So I think like that kind of gave me the wide movements of those books. But the thing is, like, I have a lot of ideas for books that I will never write because the idea is what's exciting to me and the execution is not exciting to me. Like, it would actually be excruciating to sit there and tell that story. And so with both of those books, it was like, oh, I like the idea for these, but I'm not gonna spend, the next year of my life working on these books. Like, sometimes a friend and I will talk about like starting an idea factory where we just like hire people to write all of the books that we know we'll never write. Sometimes I'll text her and be like, I had an amazing idea for a book that I think would be like so like big in the right hands, but I would not be good at writing it. And that happens. And that was kind of January and Gus's books. They were just like, I think these are cool ideas. I do not think I would enjoy writing them. Oh, sorry. I think my sound keeps cutting out.
Sorry, we can hear you.
Okay, good. As long as you can hear me, I guess.
No, I think the ladies were muted, so
Okay,
you
cool.
can hear them. We're all good. Thank you, ladies, for your question.
Thank you.
Enjoy that pool.
Yes, for all of us.
Yeah, exactly. Allison wants to know if there's any Beach Read adaptation news. Ooh, I could see that.
Yeah, so there isn't any. It's the thing with books in general where it's like once it goes to possible film or TV, it's like you're not allowed to say anything for so long, and there are all these kind of like false starts. There's like a million weird hurdles, so it's possible. It is still possible. I think the excitement about the book and the sales, like there's people interested, and I will be very glad to scream from the rooftops when I'm allowed to, but they just kind of arbitrarily, it seems like you're not allowed to talk about it until a certain point. So hopefully so, but nothing I can say for sure right now.
That's not the first time we've heard that.
Yeah, I think every time it's going to be like, well, I've either put it on my website or I just have to be like, I don't know. But cross your fingers for me.
Nikki.
Hey, hi.
Hi.
So I'm in San Francisco and we actually don't meet until tomorrow. So I literally started this book yesterday and I finished it this morning.
Good.
No, but I mean, that's what I always do. Like I always have to read it right before the meeting because I can't read anything else. Like if I read it 2 weeks ago, I would have read 2 other things in between and that gets the meeting. I'm like, what was this book? Like what are you even doing here?
Totally.
But, so in that I actually read people we meet on vacation like on Friday. I read the whole thing on Friday. It was, I mean, I'm in love. I love it. I love both of your books. Are amazing. And I was actually wondering, because I did know when I was reading that one, I knew that it came after.
Yeah.
But I also knew the names of these characters. And there's that little hint where he's like, oh, he's reading a book by Augustus Everett. And I was like, oh, this is like a little wink to the other book that I haven't read yet. So like, I did, like they exist in the same universe.
Yes.
But I guess my question is, how do you move on from a story to another? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and let it go and not keep, thinking, oh yeah, but that was the other character that did this.
Yeah, that totally happens. I mean, sometimes one of the things that I have found is my editor luckily will notice when I repeat jokes. And it's like, I have no idea I'm writing the same joke I used in another book. And she'll be like, you had this other character say and do the exact same thing. And luckily she knows that. But I think it really is like reading, where it's like sometimes when you read something really great, as soon as you're done with it, you're like, I cannot pick up another book. I just have to like sit for a couple of days. Or sometimes you try and pick up another book and you just can't start anything else. I read Colleen Hoover's Verity last week, and that like gave me like a 3-day break from reading, which I haven't had in a long time because I just was like, I can't read anything else because I'm still thinking about Verity. So it's a really similar thing for me, where it's like when I'm done with a book, sometimes I have that energy where I'm like, I'm inspired. That was great. Let's keep going. And sometimes I really do just have to do nothing. And right now, like this is the longest stretch of not writing that I've had in a while because I was with these characters for so long for my next book. And it would be really hard to just start building another person from scratch right now. But I think, like I get a lot of questions about sequels, and I don't really feel tempted by that because what I like about standalone novels really is, it's like you're getting this little glimpse, and it has enough time and space to be like a really fully fleshed out story, but then I don't feel like you run the risk of like jumping the shark necessarily. And especially with romance, I think it'd be so hard for me. I'm not saying I won't ever do it, but it would be so hard for me to take two characters who I feel like have already been through a lot and then just kind of like mess up their relationship again and be like, good luck, fix it. So it isn't really hard for me to walk away, but it is hard for me to reset and to think like, are these characters different enough from the last set and all of that? And I think a lot of times it's just like a matter of reading a lot and not writing, which can be hard and rewarding.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I haven't read Verity yet. I just got it. So I'm excited.
I can't promise you'll like it. I mean, it really, you'll read it very fast, but it's definitely like a polarizing book, which is my favorite kind. But I don't know, it will mess with your mind. You will be thinking about it for days, very likely. I mean, it's like 1% of people I feel like just hate it, and then everyone else is like, well, I can't stop thinking about it, so job well done.
Good enough.
Yeah, I loved it personally, but it is very messed up.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your question.
That's very Colleen Hoover.
Yes. Very messed up, but so good.
Can we talk about book covers just quickly? We are running out of time. I can't believe it, but book covers. So your last two books, Beach Read and The People We Meet on Vacation, are sort of like in the same vein. Their covers are very familiar, or very similar. I loved the book cover of is it A Million Junes?
Yeah.
Oh, what a beautiful cover. Everybody, you need to Google that. It's a beautiful cover.
Oh my gosh. And let me shout out the designer and artist for that for a second. His name is Anthony Elder, and you can find him on Instagram, probably if you search Anthony Elder. And he is incredible. And he dealt with me, like I made like a vision board for that book, and he just like put up with so many like weird little things. And like, yeah, he's incredible, and he's freelance now. So if anybody's ever looking for a cover designer, look him up.
Well, he did a very good job. So how much people are so fascinated with the whole process of publishing and stuff. So how much say did you get? Because this is a book by Penguin Random House. Yes. So how did that work on your end?
Yeah. I've been really lucky where like I am definitely allowed to have opinions, but I have had friends who get one cover that they love and are just absolutely over the moon for, and then the next week they're like, they find out, oh, sales didn't like it. And so basically what happens is normally it starts out, at least my experience has been, it starts out as a conversation with you and your editor, and then your editor might go to, you know, more senior editors. I remember with Beach Read, my editor was going to Cindy Huang a lot, who is like Helen Huang and Jasmine Guillory's editor. She's like more senior there, and just kind of getting Cindy's take because she's super smart and business savvy. And then they take it to the art team and they talk about that, and they might take like cover comps, or they might have like, again, like I often do make like vision boards, which don't necessarily end up having anything to do with the cover, but they like to know like what the characters look like and how they would dress and all of that. With Berkeley, I mean, if you are reading a lot in this genre, then you'll notice that there is definitely like a trend going on where they kind of stick to a similar sort of approach in general, because a lot of cover decisions are driven by sales. So they can pull up sales numbers for basically any book they've published, and it probably just any book, and kind of see like, are people liking this cover? Not that that's the only reason people buy a book, but that is like a big part of it. I remember with Beach Read, like yellow, I think was kind of the first standpoint. Like it was the first thing that we were like, I think yellow, because there weren't a ton of yellow covers yet. Now there's a ton of yellow covers. Next year, every single cover in the world is blue. And weird things like that happen. But yeah, it was kind of just like, we wanted it to feel really warm and inviting. We wanted it to stand out, but also be clearly like, this is, you know, within this rom-com-y world of what's kind of going on like in the zeitgeist right now. So there were a lot of voices, and then bottom line, like sales and marketing do have to approve everything. And sometimes people will get through all of those hurdles, and then Barnes and Noble will see the cover and they'll be like, we don't like that cover. And you go back to the drawing board. I mean, it's really like they have a lot of pull because they're doing a lot of the selling. So it is like a weird thing where there's like 2001 people sitting at a boardroom table kind of deciding what your cover is going to be. I will say that I do really like my covers, but I know a lot of people who don't like their covers and will never be able to talk about that publicly.
Okay. I wasn't going to ask this because I have my own question, but they want to know, and it's in the chat window. So I have to ask, how did Beach Read become the title for the book?
Beach Read was always the title for the book. And again, that's the thing where it's like, I know that's a very, because of my time on Goodreads, I know that's a divisive thing. It's like, you'll see so many reviews that are like, Beach Read, it's exactly what it is. And people will be like, this is not a beach read. Why is it called Beach Read? So it was called Beach Read before the book existed in any way, because I was having my January moment. I was stressed out and depressed and frustrated with the world and just felt like betrayed by humanity and like, what's going on? And I wanted to immerse myself in a beach read. And so with no plot, which I see someone says Lake Read. Have you been to Lake Michigan? Because you probably need to Google it. Like, you cannot see the far shore of Lake Michigan. There are sandy beaches, whatever. Anyway, so
look at that. It's all over.
Yeah, that's like, oh, there. Are you in Chicago?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
like, there's one of the big ones right over there. It's a beach.
It's a beach. Which you can
I get so defensive about this too.
I know, it's really funny because really you can, like, people are like, I think they picture like a brown whatever, and it's like, no, you can surf. There's a tide. People surf on Lake Michigan. Like, people make sandcastles. It is a sandy beach. But anyway, so it was always called a beach read. I saved it as that, and it was like, I'm just gonna write this. I'm gonna muscle through and write this beach read. And I think, some people are like, that's weird because it didn't really end up being a beach read, largely because they don't actually spend like, they're like on the beach for 5 minutes, which I know, I get that. But it's about January setting out to write this thing. And the question of what is a beach read, which is so much of what I was thinking. And so, yeah, and Jill and Katie say Lake Read doesn't have the same feel. I have to agree. Because a Lake Read's not really a thing. But yeah, so much of the book was that it was creating this kind of thing for me. It's like, I want to be wrapped in this warm, cozy read. But it was about a character really struggling to write that, which I was struggling to write, period. And so much of it also was like, what is a beach read? A lot of people's favorite beach reads are thrillers because they'll keep you engrossed. You pick it up and you read it in a day. Verity is a great beach read because even with like everything else going on, you will be sucked into it. So it's sort of tongue in cheek for sure. But it was literally like the document was saved as beach read. And I love that it actually got to stay beach read. And I also think even if the book, I definitely like went through a phase of like, is this book bad? And they just bought it because I had the idea to title something beach read and they know that they can sell that. And then I kind of got over that hump. But yeah, I think sales was okay with it. They're like, why haven't people done this before? Why isn't beach read already a book?
Okay, well, that answers that question for sure. And I'm amazed that you titled it one thing and it stayed, because I don't think I've even heard of that.
No, that never happens really. And none of my YA novels like were titled by me. And they were all like, the 70-second title that we came up with. So it was pretty wild to be like, oh, this document was beach read and now this finished book is beach read.
Okay, well, before we let you go, we do need to hear about what's coming up, because you have a book for book lovers, which is very much our thing.
For girly book lovers.
We need to hear about that. And we also need to hear about what's after that, because that's already in the make as well.
It is. And I won't be able to talk about that at all for a few months because I'm superstitious about only this, nothing else in the entire universe. But I don't talk about a book until a first draft is finished. So book lovers, though, I can talk about because I'm doing copy edits for that. That book, I will tell you, this is some hot gossip. The first draft of that was called City Person. And we didn't want to have like a people or person title. again, necessarily. There was people we meet on vacation, you know, normal people had blown up by the time people we meet on vacation came out. There were a bunch of other titles that were similar to that. So we knew we didn't really want to stick with that, but it was called City Person because the very starting point for this book was I wanted to write a book about the main character, or not the main character, the villain in like a small town romance novel or like a Hallmark Christmas movie, like the woman who is on her treadmill back in New York City when her boyfriend gets sent to, you know, like Breckenridge, Colorado or whatever. He gets sent there to like, you know, shut down this small Christmas tree farm and bring in big Christmas tree corporations, whatever. There's always that girlfriend who's just horrible, and she's, you know, he's calling her and she's like, what do you mean you haven't fired everyone yet? Fire them, Tom, and get on the plane. Like, she just doesn't get it. And she's on the treadmill, working on her laptop, drinking a martini the whole time. And I wanted to write about a character who keeps getting dumped for nice girls, who is not a nice girl herself, who is like, you know, like pro Botox, like loves her $400 haircut, like is on her Peloton like every single morning. I wanted to write about a woman who's normally a villain, but not having the storyline of she's the one who gets sent to fire everyone and you know, life changes her and now she like wears her hair in braids more often and like loves burgers and beer. And so I just wanted to take that character, and I found that really exciting to take this city person and put her in this country environment, but kind of do the opposite of the Hallmark movie, which I will say I love Hallmark movies. This is no shade at Hallmark movies, but I just thought that it would be really fun to take her and make her the main character and not just kind of like sand away all of her rough edges.
So is there a part in the book that talks about like books?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
So yes, so the title does make sense. The main characters, the main female lead, Nora, the city person, she is a literary agent. She's very cutthroat. She's very good at her job. She loves books, but she's not. I think when we see bookish characters, normally it's more like the shy person who's like, you know, in the coffee shop, like reading and all of that, which I think we can all relate to on some level. But Nora loves books and is very good at her job, which is like basically like lawyering and negotiating and just going to bat for her clients. So she's very intense, very jagged. And then the male lead, Charlie, is an editor who is the exact same way. He is also he's not Alex Nilsson. Oh wait, no, you just read Beach Read. He's not Gus. He's kind of Gussie. There's some Gus. But he's just a jagged like knife of a person who is very good at his job and loves books. So yeah, I just can't stop writing books about books, basically.
Well, we hope that you don't stop writing books, period.
Thank you. I hope so too.
Ladies, thank you all so much for joining us. And thank you, Emily. It's been an absolute pleasure deep diving into this month's book. And we can't wait to read your next book and then find out what's also brewing after that.
Yes, a few more months. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for your amazing questions and for being present like in parks and swimming pools and porches and homes. Really, really, really appreciate it.
Very good. Well, ladies, have a good night, and I will end the conversation now.
Bye, everyone.